All right, welcome to part 4. Okay, so now we do have sort of this way to manage our date that we're looking at, but currently our list doesn't actually do anything. Now, I kind of notice it's like flashing when I get to a date I haven't been to before, and that's because this list is actually recalling the API whenever it needs to. And by the API, I mean talking to our storage. But there's nothing different with our request. So what we're going to do is go into our entry service, and now when we call list, we're going to actually require a string called date here, and that just by doing that is going to give us at least one error. And what we can do is basically here when we pass it in, we already know this. We can pass in the date. So if I actually rebuild now, it's again not going to make any difference because we're not actually doing anything with that date, but we have some stuff there. So let's go to our entry service again, and let's figure out how we can do this. Now, there's probably various different ways. You know, if this was like a server-side API, it'd probably be a parameter we pass. This is all local storage though, and it's going to be pretty quick to work with, I think, even if we had thousands and thousands of things. So I imagine we can just actually filter them out here. So this, might take a bit of finessing to really figure out, but we essentially want to, I'm going to make something called just data for now, probably a better name, and entries dot where. And this would be the entry, we'll call it. And essentially we would want to basically compare the date of it that it is meant for today. Okay, so entries.where, we would want to entry dot entered at dot I have an idea of what we could do. Again, there's probably a different, many different ways we can do this, but let's actually, we're going to create something on the model here called is for date, and we'll pass in a date time here. And right here we can, sorry, this won't be a getter, this will be a function because we have a parameter. So here we can go if date dot year is equal to, and in this case entered at dot year, and date dot month is equal to entered at dot month, and date dot day is equal to entered at dot day. We will return true, and if none of that is true, or if that doesn't go, we will return false. So now we have this like helper that we can basically use here, and we can go entry dot is for date, and what we want to pass in here is that date right there. Now, unfortunately, this date is a string, so we would need to construct that again. However, we've kind of already done this somewhere else, so let's look at our entry date provider. And these two functions here, let's actually move them to a util. So I'm going to make a, maybe just write in the root something called utils.dart, and we'll paste these guys in, and we're going to get rid of the private declaration of them. And back over here, we'll essentially import that in and get rid of all these as we did. So then these are now functions that aren't specific to the provider. And with that being said now, we can basically take that function, which was we want to go string to date, and take, let's import string to date, and we want to use this date that got passed in. And we should just be able to return, let's call these filtered entries, and that's what we'll actually return. Oh, and we forgot one other thing. anytime we do this, we want to obviously turn it back to a list and not an iterable. Okay, so now let's just rebuild. And if we go to the next page, it's actually blank now. And that's because these were all inputted on today. All right. So let's try adding one to a new day. And in order to do that, let's just kind of review the code there. So we'll go to our entry list screen and just see what it does. So it does the food picker, and then yeah, this is the list screen. Date comes from our where does date actually come from? Entry list provider date notifier add entry. And let's just see what this function does. This adds it, saves it, and edits it to the state. Where does this date come from though? Oh, right, it's already watching our date provider. So this actually should just work because it's going to use the date. Let's just double check that. Actually, yeah, there's one thing missing here. So it would, in theory, get added to the list, but it won't get actually stored properly. So we have the copy with here, and because the empty one is going to use today's date, that's kind of a problem. What we actually need to do is create the date right here, and we will essentially take whatever is being passed in, and we're going to you know, we could decide to watch that thing right here, but I kind of like the idea of add entry actually accepting a string called date. And then in here, we would actually do the string to date function of date. Oh, sorry, this shouldn't be date, this should be entered at. And that's all good. Now we will have an error, so we'll find that guy. And this, in this case, we're going to use ref dot, and it's entry date provider. So we're just going to get that value of whatever we are right now. Okay, so let's just try adding one here. Grapes. So grapes got added. Let's go to another day and add apple. And there it is, grapes, apple. Now, the real moment of truth. Let's actually rebuild. And grapes did go there. Here's an interesting thing, because we're essentially normalizing that date to just a year, month, day. We no longer have the time. So this has actually been input at midnight, and we can do something to fix that. But it is working kind of as expected. Okay, cool. So when we, where did we actually do that? So we take the string to date. So let's allow a Boolean in this string to date. Or let's date time. So let's have a optional function here, which uses which allows us to use current time, and by default, it will be false. We'll call it actually with current time, and then basically here we can go if with current time. We're going to do something. Otherwise, we'll just kind of return this blank date object. Now, we would essentially take the date time dot now. Equals D0. Let's let us do that. I'm just going to have to finesse this for a minute. Actually, there's a pretty easy way to do this. What we'll do is we'll make something called now, which is date time dot now. And the date time, we can actually pass in other parameters. So we can pass in hour, minute, second. So then we can actually do now dot hour, now dot minute, now dot second. And we want to actually return that. So if with current time is true, we will allow that. So string to date. Now the place we actually need to do this is in our entry service, because we want to use the time for now. So we just would go true in the wrong spot. True. Okay, so let's just try adding another one. Let's add bread. I have too many breads to know if that even works. So let's add fish. So we got fish, and the time is not actually going, and that actually kind of makes sense. I bet you if we refresh, we will see fish with the right time. Yes, 12:30. Nope, fish 12:30. Interesting. Oh, I did in the wrong spot. That's why. We don't care about. We're only comparing dates there. It's on the create method that we essentially want, which is done in here. So let's do true there. Let's just rebuild. And let's add test. And we should see test at the bottom with the current time right now, and that is actually the correct time. And let's rebuild and make sure that test actually got put in at the right time. There we go. Cool. So, you know, we're still constructing a specific date, but it's going to use the time. Okay. All right. I also think something that'd be helpful is having a search bar here. So let's figure out how to do that. So we're going to open up our, we have the picker, food picker. Okay, so basically above this list view, we're going to add a text form field. And we'll give it some decoration, input, decoration. Why is this? It's really getting in my way there. And let's just give it a hint text, which I think is just a string. It is. And we'll just have it say search. And let's just see how that looks. So now we have the search thing here. I know this doesn't look beautiful, but functionality first. That can be a const. Okay, then we're going to want to do something when we search. So let's remember, this is essentially looking at watching our food list provider of all. Awesome. So what I'm going to do All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at our food list provider, and we're going to copy this whole thing, and we're going to go to our providers, and we're going to go food search provider .dart. And we can get rid of this, and we can get rid of this, and this. And down here, it's no longer going to be a family. This will just be a global search, so we don't need any of these things. And we don't actually need an update because we're never going to be adding things to this list. And there we go. So it will be a list of foods here. Okay, now we need a way to actually search. String Q. And what we could do is actually just get all the items, and then we can go and essentially filter them. So we can go state equals items dot where. Let's just call it, this will be a food, so we'll just use F. And we go F dot name dot contains, and we'll contain that string and turn this back to a list. So anytime we're searching, anytime we call the search function, we'll just get all the items real quickly, and then basically filter them out and update the state. We'll also want a clear, which should just set this back to this right here. All right. Okay, now for our food picker, we're just going to temporarily, this might be needed at some point again, I'm going to comment this out and paste it down. And instead, let's watch the search list provider. Sorry, food, what was it called? Food search I realized we didn't actually rename these things. Let's do that. Food search provider. And down here, just make sure that this one is camel cased. Back here, food search provider. And this isn't a family anymore, so we can just go like this. Now, because our food search provider kind of works the same way and gets all items, right now this should just work just like before. So let's go here and we have our search. Yeah, they're coming back. But the difference now we want to make is on this, wherever our search bar is, which I'm having trouble finding, there it is. Let's have an onChange function. And we'll just call this Q. And what is Q? It's a string, obviously. Yeah, it's a string. So then what we can do is ref.read food search provider .notifier I think that's, what was it, .search? Yeah, .search, and then pass in that Q. So now, if I go here and actually start typing test, we actually get these things coming in. I realized because of lowercase, I think, yeah. So if I search it with an uppercase T, I start getting it, but then this I do not. So that's kind of, kind of a pain. Oh, good though, we can fix that. So in our search provider, we can just take the f.name.to lowercase contains q.to lowercase. So that'll just make everything lowercase. So we're comparing, lowercase, and now if I search, I get it. Okay, cool. All right, so we have sort of a search provider, which makes sense. And I actually realized we can probably just use this globally, because anytime we're adding a food, we don't really have to worry about the different types of lists, at least for now. So we're just gonna actually use this, meaning there's probably a file we can remove, and now we can search. Now we need a way to clear the search. Obviously you can hit backspace, but we probably want an easier way to do that. So on our search, I think it's on the decoration, we can add trailing? Suffix icon. And what is this, a widget? So let's just put an icon, button, on pressed. We'll do something, and the icon itself, .clear. And I wonder why, what is this complaining about? Oh, because this is a const. We can't have a const when we have a function. And in this case, we would do the same thing here, except we would run .clear. Okay, so now if I try and add something and start typing, I can go clear. So that's pretty good. Now, what we could also do is this search provider, we can actually make a text editing controller here. And that's just, we'll just instantiate it, text editing controller. That way over here, on the text form field, we can go controller, provider, and at this point, I'm seeing we're kind of copying and pasting this a lot, so let's actually put this up here, and I'll search provider equals this, and we will just rename these things. So wherever we were doing this, these two right here, search provider, and then the controller for this will actually be the search provider dot controller. And over here, whenever we clear, we also want to take the controller dot text and set it to blank. We can actually do that first. So that will now, although I might have to rebuild for this, I'll just do it to be safe. Oops. Search. So now if I start typing and click X, it clears it. Okay, and then something else we want to worry about. So if I actually start typing here and close and reopen, That value is still there, which is fine. This will still work, but we probably want to also, anytime you close this, also clear that provider. So on our, let's just find where our food picker actually gets used. We need to search for it and find it. On select. So yeah, whenever we select something, we probably want to a few places we could do this. Oh wait, okay, so we already have the on press, which is the on select. I guess in the same place that we're going to do our navigator, we can go ref.read and oops, yeah, we already have that in this file, so we can actually just go search provider.clear whenever we do that. And that will mean if we actually select something, so I'm going to type something and select it, and when we come back, it did not work. If we can now, oh, maybe, let's see, that shouldn't matter. So I'm going to search for bread, click it. Okay, so it is not actually clearing. If food doesn't equal null, search provider.clear. Yeah, clear controller text equals this. State should be the new state. I wonder why that's not being called. Let's just print the word clear here and see what's going on. Debug console. Add a new one. Click bread. Yeah, okay, so that's not actually being called for some reason. Oh, right, because this is the function when we actually go and add a new one. The one I want to be doing this on is actually here. So we can go search provider.clear. And that will work. Bread, go to bread, boom, they all come back. Cool. Now, the one thing we're not handling is, okay, let's imagine I am searching for grapes and then I decide to cancel this. If I come back, it's still going to be as it was, which maybe is an okay UX decision, but I think we should also clear it there. So in order to do that, we have this show modal bottom sheet. So what we'll actually do is await this, and then after all of this, we can go ref.read food search provider dot notifier dot clear, so that when this modal bottom sheet goes away in any, for any instance, we basically have it gone. Sweet. So there's kind of one a little annoying thing is the fact that it comes back really fast. So you kind of close it and it actually expands again. Let me, now that we've put this here, I believe we can actually get rid of it here. And let's also just remove it from here. Because anytime this mode will close now, it should clear it. So let's just make sure that's still working. Grapes and select, and we should come back and it's good. That way, what we can do on the entry list screen where we're clearing it, we can actually put this in we can do an await here, future dot delayed duration, and let's just do milliseconds of maybe 500. So it won't actually clear it until half a second, which should be enough time for it to go away. And so let's try it. Go like this, type grape, add grape, goes away, but when we come back, it's here. So that works nice. And I think we are in a good spot. Okay, so we spent the past couple of videos working in this entries screen. If you recall, we also have something called food list screen, which is where we manage all of our foods and can add new foods and all that kind of stuff. We can, delete this food, everything's fine. However, we need a way to obviously let people navigate between these different things. We don't want to just, as a developer, have to go in and change this for someone when they request it. That would be that just wouldn't work. So what we're going to use is we're going to add some routing. And do this. Now I want to, even though this app is pretty simple, we could probably just use the built-in, navigator stuff, but I haven't used that in a long time because I've been using something called AutoRouter. AutoRouter is a pretty cool package, and we are going to install it now. Actually, I think it's just called AutoRoute. Yes, it's called AutoRoute. So we're going to go and do fvm Flutter pub add AutoRoute. I'm only using FVM because I'm using Flutter version manager, so I can have a specific version. If you're following along and aren't using FVM, just omit the word FVM. Okay, so now we have a new package. Let's just make sure it's here. I'll search for the route. So AutoRoute. Okay, cool. So AutoRouter is a package for dynamic routing. It uses generators like we're using on Freeze, so it allows you to kind of write less code, and it generates a lot of really good code that you never have to actually touch. So what we want to actually do now is we're going to make a I'm going to put this right in the source, and we're just going to call it root container.dart. And this will essentially be the container that hosts our tabs and everything. So let's make a stateless widget called root container. And for now, just because I love doing this, text, hello world. And let's actually import stuff in the way that we like it. And let's make this a consumer widget, as we've done on pretty much every other widget. Okay, so now we have this root container, and let's go back to our home screen, or our main.dart, and just replace this here temporarily, root container. Now we should just have this hello world. This thing doesn't have a scaffold or anything, so it's pretty grotesque, but it's there. Okay, so our container itself. Let's do some fun stuff in here. So what we need to first do is actually define some routes. And this is going to use something called, it's going to be a list of page route info, which is part of the AutoRoute package called routes. And we're just going to make it an empty array at first. So that's kind of our first step there. What we also need to do is we're going to make something called router.dart. Okay, so AutoRoute allows us to essentially create routes, and we're going to make a const called app routes, and it's going to be equal to this thing called AutoRoute. And AutoRoute allows us to make children and all these kinds of things. So first of all, we'll just give its path sort of like an empty, and this is so that it supports web and everything, but this will kind of be like the root, the root path. There's, it's not like, pages / whatever. It's just, on the .com if this was hosted on web. And what we want to make the page is actually that thing we just made, the root container. All right. Oh, and a lot of the times AutoRoute, you don't actually, you're more passing references to things, so we don't actually have the braces, the parentheses there. Then we want to give it some children. And what we will start with is making another AutoRoute. So this is kind of like a widget tree in the sense, like we have AutoRoute, then it has children of AutoRoute. And this first one we're going to call is going to be, we'll do entries first. So this will be like, think of this as a tab in this. And we need to give this whole tab router a name, and we'll call it just entry tab router. And it needs a page too, but we're actually going to use something just called the empty router page. And again, we don't actually execute it, we just pass it in. And then we're going to give some children. And here's where it gets fun. We have another AutoRoute, and this path will be just empty. And its page is going to be this that screen that we made, entry list screen. Okay, and if we needed deeper routes, this is meant for like a stacked router kind of thing. But we want to do a whole separate tab, so I'm going to copy this whole thing, and we'll actually call this one foods, and maybe we'll just call it foods, sure. And this will be food tab router. The path only really matters, if you're going to web, and you have to make sure they're unique, but other than that, we're good. And this page will be the food list screen. And there we go. And I'm just going to then go like this. Okay, next thing is in our main.dart, which we still have open. We need to sort of configure some routing stuff. So I'm going to comment out this home thing. We no longer are going to need it. And we are going to instead pass in a couple of things here. I'm just going to copy this from my sample project and walk through it. Oh, sorry, one more thing we have to do is a material app. We have to do material app.router. And then we pass in these sorts of things. So this says app router, which is actually we might not have even made yet. Right. So there's one more thing we have to do. This is kind of like configuring it, and then we actually have to grab this stuff right here, and we'll pass in app routes, which right. This is actually a list of routes technically. Then we pass in this. So this is just the thing, and this is going to generate a bunch of things. So we're going to run the our generator function again. And this should generate some stuff for us. If we give it a minute. Okay. Okay, I was just reviewing the docs real quick, and what we're going to do is make something called, this is done in outside of the build function, final app router, and we're going to import in app router, and you'll see this is actually, wonder why that's, app router isn't defined. So we have this stateless widget, final app router equals app router. I think I'm just not importing it correctly. But what I'm going to do is, I'll just actually make this the same as what I have in all the other code. And let's actually import this. It's just something that's not actually importing correctly. We have AutoRoute imported. And do we have the generated code? Let's see. I think we're just missing one quick thing in our YAML file. Okay, one other package we actually have to install is called AutoRoute generator. And then we'll rerun our build function again. You'll see it's right here, AutoRoute generator. And now when we want to see it actually generate this thing called router.gr.dart, and that's actually what I'm trying to import here. And I think it will almost work. Let's see. We might just have to import it manually. So we'll use our source, and then where is this actually stored? Right in the source, yeah. Router.gr.dart. Can this be a const? Okay, we're just going to get rid of some consts here. Okay, then, so now all this stuff seems to be working, except navigator key is apparently no longer a thing. It's something different when you do it with the, let me just see if we're even using this anywhere before we get too lost in it. We are using it for this, but I actually don't think this is necessary anymore. So I'm just going to then not worry about this. And if everything breaks, we will know to come back here. I'm gonna make a to-do, fix this. Okay, so now we have our AutoRoute observer. Let's save everything. Let's rebuild. And there's one other thing we actually need to do, and then we should be up and running. Let's just observe the docs. So we have our router delegate, which is this, and then we have our router information parser, I feel like it's actually, there's just a problem. Yeah, this is the problem. Oh, our test file that we've never even touched is breaking. We're going to delete it, and then we're going to rebuild. Debug console. Okay, sometimes rebuild doesn't actually work. I definitely shouldn't be saying this anymore because we got rid of the root container thing. So I'm annoyingly enough, I'm probably just going to have to click the stop button and rebuild it. All right, I rebuilt, and then I was kind of like, wait, it's not working, but I realized, oh, of course, we have this temporary thing here in our root container. So we're no longer even referencing the root container anywhere, like this is gone. It's just because our router itself is using this root container here. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is essentially update our root container to actually make use of the screens in the router. So what I'm going to use in this build function is actually a auto tabs scaffold. Okay. And this is where we now have to pass in our routes. And we've already made these routes here, so we're good on that. However, there's nothing in it yet. So let's put some routes in here. So here's where we want to use, and if we open this again to open up our router, we sort of created these things, entry tab router and food tab router. Now these are just strings, but the generator uses these to actually create some classes for us. So I can go like this, and we do have to import this. And then we also want the food tab router. So now these are our two sort of like base routes. Now inside here, let's just save this. And we'll save that. And now we actually see, oh cool, we have, it's going to the routes. And because this was the first one in it, it just took this one. The next thing we're going to want to do is actually add a tab bar. So in the auto tab scaffold, we passed in the routes, but we can also pass in a bottom navigation builder. And this takes context and something called a variable that we can access the router with. And in here, we're going to return a bottom navigation bar, and it's going to have some items in it. Okay, for the items, we're going to, this is an array of basically tabs, so we can use the bottom navigation bar item, and we can give it an icon. Let's say icon, icons dot, I'm just going to use home for now. And it can have a label as well, so let's give it a label called entries, and then I'm going to duplicate this, and we're actually going to just change this one to, let's see if there's something for food bank, sure. Foods. Okay, so if I now save this, we'll actually see at the bottom now we have these tabs. Now they don't do anything yet, but they're there. So the last thing we have to do is on the navigation, on the auto tab scaffold itself, we can also pass in, on the bottom navigation bar, items is the only thing we're passing in. We can also have an on tap event. And on tap has a variable we can access called index. So index being, this would be on tap 0, on tap 1, so on and so forth. And we can then run a function to do this. And because we have access to this tab router, we can basically just go tabs router dot set active index, and we can set that to literally this index here. All right, now we save that, and we should be able to go between these two now. And we do. So there, we have a bit of a tab bar now. to be able to go through these things and make it work. Now, lastly, we need a way to tell the router which one is the active one, right? And in order to do that, we just need to, in here, go current index, and the current index will be equal to the tabs router dot active index. So we're setting the active index, and we're referencing it here. And that's essentially, this current index is what is used to determine sort of like the icon color and the label color to show whether it's, you know, the one you're on. So there you have it. We'll leave this video here. It's a good, I think, a good spot to take a bit of a break, and we'll continue on with the next one.